The rain came down in sheets, a relentless Manhattan deluge that turned the city's streets into a shimmering maze of reflections. Umbrellas bobbed like black lilies in a storm, and the air carried the sharp scent of wet asphalt and coffee from corner carts. Ethan Caldwell, a white American tech billionaire with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, strode through the chaos of Midtown. His tailored navy suit clung to his frame, and his pale skin glistened under the rain's assault, though his expression remained as unyielding as the steel towers around him. At 35, Ethan was a man who commanded boardrooms and headlines with equal ease, his blue eyes cold as the algorithms that had built his empire. He didn't notice the world beyond his phone screen, where stock tickers and emails demanded his attention. An African-American elementary school teacher, Sarah Miller, was hurrying in the opposite direction. Her dark skin glowed under the faint streetlights, her tightly coiled hair tucked beneath a hood that did little to shield her from the downpour. At 32, Sarah carried herself with a quiet strength, her brown eyes warm but guarded, shaped by years of navigating classrooms and skeptical parents. Her arms clutched a stack of graded papers, a thermos of tea, and a latte she'd splurged on from a cafe near her school. She was late for a parent-teacher conference, her sneakers splashing through puddles as she wove through the crowd. Their collision was inevitable. Distracted by a notification, Ethan didn't see Sarah until her latte exploded across his chest, soaking his silk tie and staining the pristine white of his shirt. The thermos hit the pavement with a metallic clatter, and papers scattered like leaves in the wind. "Damn it!" Ethan's voice was low, sharp, his eyes flicking to the brown stain spreading across his vest. He looked up, ready to snap, but froze. Sarah's face, framed by her dripping hood, was a mix of horror and defiance. Her dark skin contrasted with the pale gray of her raincoat, and her eyes held a spark that made him pause. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, scrambling to gather her papers before they dissolved in the rain. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she knelt, the latte cup rolling into a gutter. "I didn't see you." Ethan's instinct was to brush it off, to move on. He met with investors in 20 minutes, and a ruined suit was the least of his concerns. But something about her, maybe the way she didn't flinch under his gaze, or her fingers clutched those soggy papers, made him linger. "You're soaked," he said, stating the obvious. His tone softened, though he didn't know why. "Let me help." Sarah glanced up, her expression wary. "I've got it," she said, stuffing the papers into her bag. "You've got enough problems with that suit." He almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he pulled an umbrella from his briefcase and held it over her, shielding her from the worst of the rain. "At least take this," he said, his voice clipped, but not unkind. "You're drowning out here." She hesitated, then stood, brushing wet curls from her face. Her dark skin glistened with raindrops, and for a moment, Ethan noticed the way her cheekbones caught the light. She took the umbrella, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Thanks," she said, her tone polite but distant. "But I don't need rescuing." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Didn't say you did." He glanced at his watch, then back at her. "You sure you're okay?" Sarah nodded, already stepping back into the crowd. "I'm fine. Watch where you're going next time." She turned the umbrella, bobbing as she disappeared into the sea of pedestrians. Ethan stood there, rain soaking his hair, the stain on his suit spreading like a bruise. He didn't know her name, but her face lingered in his mind, a flash of warmth in the gray city. He shook his head, forcing himself to move. He had a meeting to dominate, a deal to close. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just met someone who didn't care about his name or net worth. It was unsettling. It was intriguing. Sarah's classroom smelled of chalk dust and construction paper, a small oasis in the crumbling public school on the Lower East Side. She stood at the blackboard, erasing fractions, her mind still on the man in the suit. His pale face, those piercing blue eyes, how he'd held the umbrella like a peace offering. She'd seen men like him before, rich, entitled, expecting the world to bend. But there'd been something else in his gaze, a flicker of curiosity that caught her off guard. "Miss Miller, you okay, Jamie?" One of her students tugged at her sleeve. His gap-toothed grin was infectious, his brown skin dusted with eraser shavings. "I'm fine, Jamie," she said, ruffling his hair. "Just thinking about coffee I shouldn't have bought." She pushed the stranger from her mind and focused on her kids. They were her anchor, her reason for staying in a job that paid too little and demanded too much. Her dark hands moved swiftly, organizing worksheets for the next lesson. She didn't have time for distractions, especially not ones in $1,000 suits. But the city had other plans. That evening, as Sarah graded papers in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, her phone buzzed with a text from Emma, her best friend and fellow teacher. "Check the news. Your latte guy is Ethan Caldwell." Sarah's heart sank. She Googled the name, and there he was. Ethan Caldwell, tech mogul, white American billionaire, his pale face staring from a Forbes cover. The man she doused in coffee was worth billions, a titan who built AI systems that powered half the world's apps. She groaned, tossing her phone onto the couch. "Great," she muttered. "Just what I need." The next day, the rain had stopped, but the city's buzz hadn't. Sarah arrived at school to find a sleek black car parked out front, its driver holding a box wrapped in silver paper. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice formal, "from Mr. Caldwell." Inside the box was a new thermos, sleek and expensive, with a note, "For your next coffee run. Try not to spill this one. Ethan." Sarah stared at the note, her dark fingers tracing the crisp handwriting. Part of her wanted to laugh. Part of her wanted to throw the thermos in the trash. She settled for tucking it into her bag, unsure whether to feel flattered or insulted. Ethan's office was a glass cathedral atop a skyscraper, its view stretching from the Hudson to the East River. He sat at his desk, pale hands tapping a pen against a report. His suit was fresh, the late incident a memory he'd tried to bury under a mountain of work. But Sarah Miller kept creeping into his thoughts. Her dark skin, unapologetic stare, and how she'd dismissed his help without a second thought. He wasn't used to being ignored. "Sir." His assistant Clara poked her head in. "You asked about the school on the Lower East Side. Their fundraisers tomorrow night. Should I add it to your schedule?" Ethan leaned back, his blue eyes narrowing. He'd looked up Sarah after their encounter, a quick search revealing her as a third-grade teacher with a knack for inspiring kids. The school was struggling, its budget slashed to the bone. He could help. He should help. But was it for the kids or for her? "Add it," he said finally. "And make sure we bring something substantial." Clara nodded, but her expression was skeptical. "This isn't your usual scene, sir. It's public school." "I know," Ethan said, his voice low. "That's the point." He didn't tell her about the woman with the latte, or how her dark eyes had challenged him without saying a word. He didn't tell anyone. But as he stared at the city, its lights flickering like stars, he felt a pull he couldn't explain. Sarah Miller was a puzzle, and Ethan Caldwell wasn't a man who left puzzles unsolved. The fundraiser was a modest affair, held in the school's gymnasium under flickering fluorescent lights. Sarah stood near a table of homemade cookies, her dark skin glowing under the harsh lighting, her simple black dress starkly contrasting with the glitter of Ethan's world. She chatted with parents, deflecting questions about budgets and layoffs with practiced ease. But her mind was elsewhere, still wrestling with the thermos and the man who'd sent it. When Ethan walked in, the room shifted. His pale face stood out in the crowd, his tailored suit a beacon of wealth in a sea of thrift store sweaters. Whispers followed him, parents nudging each other as he approached the principal. Sarah's stomach twisted. What was he doing here? Miss Miller, Ethan said, his voice cutting through the chatter. He extended a hand, his blue eyes locking onto hers. Good to see you again. She shook his hand, her dark fingers cool against his. Mr. Caldwell, she said, her tone neutral. Didn't expect you here. He smiled, a rare crack in his CEO facade. I like surprises. He turned to the principal, handing over a check. For the school, $1 million. The room erupted in gasps. Sarah's jaw tightened. $1 million could save the art program, fix the leaking roof, and buy books for kids like Jamie. But it also meant attention. Attention she didn't want. She could already feel the eyes on her, the whispers linking her to the billionaire, with the pale skin and the piercing gaze. Thank you, she said, her voice steady, but her heart racing. This means a lot to the kids. Ethan's eyes softened just for a moment. I hope so, he said. Let's talk about how to make it count. Sarah nodded, but her mind was screaming. She didn't trust men like Ethan Caldwell, men whose pale faces graced magazine covers and whose money could buy anything except maybe her trust. As he walked away, shaking hands with awestruck parents, she felt a storm brewing. This wasn't just about coffee or umbrellas anymore. This was something bigger, something dangerous. And Sarah Miller wasn't sure she was ready for it. The gymnasium smelled of cheap coffee and sugar cookies, a far cry from the polished boardrooms Ethan Caldwell usually dominated. The fundraiser was in full swing, with parents milling around tables piled with raffle tickets and handmade crafts. Streamers hung limply from the ceiling, and a banner reading "Save Our Schools" sagged against the wall. Sarah Miller stood near the refreshment table, her black dress hugging her frame, her posture stiff as she fielded questions from parents. She was used to scrutiny. Teaching third graders in a struggling school came with its share of skeptical looks, but tonight felt different. The air buzzed with a new tension centered on the man who just walked in. Ethan's presence was like a stone dropped into a still pond. Heads turned, whispers spread, and the room seemed to turn toward him. His suit was immaculate, his movements precise, as if he'd calculated every step to maximize impact. He handed the principal a check, his voice carrying just enough to ensure everyone heard $1 million for the kids. The crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah's stomach churned. $1 million was a lifeline. New books, repaired classrooms, maybe even a music program. But it also meant headlines, and headlines meant trouble. She could already see the parents' eyes flicking toward her, connecting dots that didn't exist. She'd spilled coffee on him, nothing more. Yet the room seemed to hum with a narrative she hadn't written. Miss Miller, Ethan said, approaching her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Hope I didn't cause too much of a stir. You did? She said, her tone dry but polite. She crossed her arms, her fingers brushing the edge of her dress. But the kids will benefit, so I can't complain. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment too long. Good. I want to make sure it's used well. Maybe we could discuss it over coffee sometime, without the spill. Sarah's lips twitched, but she didn't smile. I'll think about it, she said, refilling a tray of cookies. She needed space to process the weight of his gesture, and the eyes were now watching her every move. By morning, the city had a new story. Billionaire's Cinderella teacher snags. Ethan Caldwell's heart and his checkbook screamed one tabloid headline. Another called her the Latte Lady, complete with a grainy photo of their rainy collision. Sarah's phone buzzed with notifications, each a jab at her carefully built life. Parents texted, some congratulating her, others demanding if she'd used Ethan to secure the donation. The principal called her into a meeting. Her tone clipped. We're grateful, Sarah. But this attention isn't helping. Sarah sat in her classroom staring at the check's photocopy on the bulletin board. $1 million. It should have felt like a victory, but like a trap. She loved her job, her kids the chaos of teaching fractions and mediating playground fights. But now, every move she made was under a microscope. She could feel the whispers in the staff room, the sidelong glances from parents picking up their kids. Nang Lo Lem. They called her Cinderella, as if she'd been waiting for a prince to save her. Her best friend Emma burst in her curly hair, bouncing as she dropped into a chair. "Girl, you're famous," she said, tossing a tabloid onto the desk. "This is wild." "It's a nightmare," Sarah said, rubbing her temples. "I didn't ask for this. I spilled coffee on the guy Emma. That's it." Emma leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Maybe. But he didn't have to show up here with $1 million. He's making a statement, Sarah." The question is what kind. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't know. All she knew was that her quiet life was unraveling, and Ethan Caldwell was at the center of it. Ethan sat in his office, the city sprawling below like a chessboard he'd mastered long ago. The fundraiser had gone as planned, better even. The donation had secured goodwill headlines and a tax write-off. But as he scrolled through the morning's news, his jaw tightened. Cinderella headlines. Paparazzi shots of Sarah, her face caught mid-stride, her expression a mix of annoyance and exhaustion. He hadn't meant for this. "Clara?" He called, his voice sharp. His assistant appeared, tablet in hand. "Please get me a meeting with the school's principal and find out who's leaking these stories." "Already on it," Clara said, her tone brisk. "But sir, you knew this would happen. You don't drop $1 million in a public school and expect it to stay quiet." Ethan didn't respond. He'd wanted to help, partly for the kids, partly for her. Sarah Miller wasn't like the people in his world, all polished smiles and hidden agendas. She was honest, raw, and unapologetic, and now she was paying for his grand gesture. He grabbed his coat and headed out, ignoring Clara's raised eyebrow. 20 minutes later, he was at the school with a bouquet of lilies. The secretary's eyes widened as he walked in, but he waved her off, heading straight for Sarah's classroom. She was at her desk, grading papers, her posture rigid. When she saw him, her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, standing. "To what do I owe the visit?" He held out the flowers. "An apology," he said. "I didn't mean for the press to turn this into whatever this is." Sarah took the lilies, her fingers brushing the petals. "You think flowers fix a tabloid storm?" she said, her voice low but sharp. "Parents are questioning my integrity. The school board's breathing down my neck. This isn't just about you and your check." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I can fix this," he said. "I have people, lawyers, PR." "No," she cut him off. "I don't need your people. I need this to stop." She set the flowers down, her eyes locking onto his. "You meant, well, I get it. But you don't live in my world. You don't know what this kind of attention does." He wanted to argue, to promise he could shield her. But her words hit harder than he expected. She was right. He didn't know her world. He'd grown up scraping by in Detroit, but that was a lifetime ago. Now he lived in penthouses and private jets. He didn't know what it was like to be her, to face the whispers and the judgment. "I'll make it right," he said, finally, his voice quieter. "Not with money or lawyers. Tell me what you need." Sarah studied him, her expression unreadable. "I need to do my job," she said, "and I was hoping you could stop making it more challenging." She returned to her papers, dismissing him without another word. Ethan stood there, the lilies a bright splash of white against the cluttered desk. For the first time in years, he felt out of his depth. He'd built an empire, but Sarah Miller was a challenge he hadn't anticipated. As he left the classroom, the weight of her words settled over him. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, the lilies in a vase on her kitchen table. Emma was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "He's trying," Emma said, holding up a headline about Ethan's donation. Guy could have written a smaller check and stayed out of the spotlight. He didn't. "He's a billionaire," Sarah said, chopping vegetables for dinner. "Everything he does is in the spotlight." "Maybe," Emma said, sitting up. "But he showed up with flowers, Sarah. That's not nothing. Most guys like him would have sent an assistant." Sarah didn't answer. She didn't know what to make of Ethan Caldwell. Part of her wanted to believe he was genuine, that the man who'd held an umbrella over her in the rain was more than a headline. But another part that had fought for every inch of respect in her career told her to stay cautious. Men like Ethan didn't change the world. They shaped it to fit their needs. As she diced carrots, her phone buzzed with a new email. It was from the school board, requesting a meeting to discuss recent developments. Her heart sank. The donation was a gift, but it was also a curse. And Sarah Miller wasn't sure how much longer she could carry both. The air in Sarah Miller's classroom felt heavier than usual. Scrutiny overshadowed the familiar scent of chalk dust and crayons. Outside, the Lower East Side buzzed with its usual chaos, honking taxis and shouting vendors. But Sarah felt under siege inside. Her desk was cluttered with lesson plans and a half-empty coffee mug, but her attention was fixed on her phone. Notifications piled up, emails from parents, texts from colleagues, and a relentless stream of social media tags. Cinderella teacher was trending. Every post felt like a jab at her carefully built life. The school board's email from the night before still lingered in her mind. A curt request for a meeting to discuss recent developments. Sarah knew what that meant. Ethan Caldwell's $1 million donation had saved the school's art program and patched the leaky roof, but it had also turned her into a headline. The tabloids were ruthless, spinning her coffee spill into a fairy tale she hadn't signed up for. Parents whispered at pickup, their eyes lingering on her, as if she'd orchestrated the whole thing. Even her principal, usually a staunch ally, had started tiptoeing around her, her smiles tight and cautious. Sarah leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She'd spent years earning respect in this school, proving herself through late nights, grading papers, and early mornings tutoring kids like Jamie, who needed extra help to catch up. Now all anyone saw was the latte lady, the woman who'd supposedly charmed a billionaire. It wasn't fair, but fairness wasn't part of the deal when you taught in a crumbling public school. The classroom door swung open, and Emma burst in, her curly hair bouncing as she dropped a stack of worksheets on the desk. Emma said, "You look like you're plotting a jailbreak," her voice teasing, but her eyes concerned. "What's the latest?" Sarah slid her phone across the desk, the screen displaying a headline, "Teacher's Fairy Tale: How Sarah Miller Landed Ethan Caldwell's Millions." Emma snorted, scrolling through the article. "This is garbage," she said. "They're acting like you're out here scheming for his wallet." "I know," Sarah said, her voice low, "but try telling that to the parents or the school board. I've got a meeting with them tomorrow." Emma's eyes widened. "They're not firing you over this, are they?" "Not yet," Sarah said, standing to organize her desk. "But they're concerned about the optics. Having a billionaire drop $1 million on your school is bad for business." Emma shook her head. "This is why I stay out of the spotlight. You need to shut this down, Sarah. Tell Caldwell to call off his PR dogs." Sarah laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You think he's behind this? He's got better things to do than leak stories to tabloids." "Maybe," Emma said, leaning against the desk. "But he's not helping. Showing up with flowers didn't exactly scream low profile." Sarah's mind flashed to the lilies Ethan had brought, their white petals still bright on her kitchen table. She hadn't known what to make of his apology, his promise to fix things. Part of her wanted to believe him, but the other part, the part that had fought tooth and nail for every ounce of respect in this city, knew better. Men like Ethan Caldwell didn't live in her world. His promises were as fleeting as the headlines. The bell rang, signaling the end of her free period. Sarah stood smoothing her sweater. "I need to get to class," she said. "But Emma, what do I do? I can't stop the press. And I can't lose this job." Emma grabbed her hand, squeezing it. "You stay you," she said. "You're Sarah Miller. You've handled worse than a few nosy reporters. Don't let this guy or anyone make you feel small." Sarah nodded, but the words felt hollow. As she headed to her classroom, the day's weight pressed harder. She could handle the kids, the lesson plans, and the endless budget cuts. But this was a storm she hadn't prepared for. Ethan Caldwell's office was a fortress of glass and steel, its sleek lines and minimalist decor a stark contrast to the chaos of Sarah's world. He sat at his desk, staring at a tablet filled with headlines. Billionaire's Cinderella was the least offensive of them. Others were crueler, questioning Sarah's motives and integrity. One article even speculated about her seducing him for the donation, complete with a blurry photo of her holding the lilies he'd brought. Ethan's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the tablet. Clara, his assistant, knocked and entered her tablet already open. "The school's principal is available tomorrow at 10, she said, "and I've got PR working on a statement to calm the press." "But sir, it's not going to stop overnight." "I know," Ethan said, his voice sharp. He stood pacing to the window. The city sprawled below, a glittering puzzle he'd spent years mastering. But this situation was slipping through his fingers. He'd wanted to help Sarah's school to make a difference. Instead, he'd turned her life into a circus. "You didn't think this through," Clara said, her tone blunt, but not unkind. "Dropping $1 million in a public school. It's catnip for the tabloids." Ethan turned, his eyes narrowing. "I didn't do it for the headlines." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you? You knew the cameras would follow. You always do." He didn't answer. She wasn't wrong. Ethan Caldwell didn't make moves without calculating the outcome. The donation had been strategic, a way to boost his company's image while helping a struggling school. But Sarah's face, her fierce independence, hadn't been part of the equation. He'd expected gratitude, maybe admiration. Instead, she'd looked at him like he was the problem. "I need to see her," he said, grabbing his coat. "Cancel my afternoon." Clara's lips pursed. "Is that a good idea? She's not exactly your biggest fan right now." "I'll fix it," he said, already heading for the door. He didn't know how, but he had to try. Sarah's classroom was a whirlwind of noise and energy, the kids buzzing with the excitement of a new project. She stood at the front, guiding them through a math game, her smile practiced but genuine. Teaching was her sanctuary, where the world's noise couldn't touch her. But when Ethan appeared in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space, that sanctuary crumbled. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice low, but carrying over the chatter. The kids turned, their eyes wide. Jamie, her favorite troublemaker, whispered, "Is that the money guy?" Sarah's cheeks burned. "Class focus," she said, pointing to the whiteboard. She crossed the room to Ethan, her voice low. "What are you doing here?" "This is my classroom." "I know," he said, his eyes searching hers. "I came to apologize." Again. She crossed her arms, her body a shield. "You apologized yesterday. It didn't change anything." He held out a small envelope. "This might. It's a letter to the school board explaining the donation was my decision, not yours. I've got my lawyers on standby if they push further." Sarah took the envelope, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her, one she ignored. "You think this will stop the parents? The press? You opened this door, Ethan. You can't just close it. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. I'm trying, Sarah. I didn't mean to make your life harder. She studied him, searching for the catch. Men like Ethan didn't apologize twice. They didn't show up in third-grade classrooms with letters and lawyers. But his eyes held no trace of the polished CEO she'd expected, just a man caught off guard, trying to make things right. I appreciate it, she said finally, her voice softer but firm. But I need to handle this my way. I've fought my own battles my whole life. I'm not stopping now. He nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. I get it, but if you need me, I'm here. As he left, the kids erupted in whispers, and Sarah's heart pounded. She tucked the envelope into her pocket, her mind racing. Ethan Caldwell was a problem she didn't know how to solve. But for the first time, she wondered if he might be worth figuring out. The next day, the school board meeting was a gauntlet. Sarah sat across from a panel of stern faces, their questions sharp and relentless. Miss Miller, how do you explain your relationship with Mr. Caldwell? One asked. Another chimed in. Is this donation compromising your professionalism? Sarah's hands clenched under the table, but she kept her voice steady. There is no relationship. I met Mr. Caldwell by accident. The donation was his decision, not mine. I have a letter from him confirming this. She slid Ethan's letter across the table, her heart pounding. The board members read it in silence, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the principal spoke. We'll take this under advisement, Miss Miller, but the public's perception matters. We can't have this kind of distraction. Sarah left the meeting, her legs shaking, but her head high. Emma was waiting outside, her arms crossed. How'd it go? Sarah said, they're concerned, mimicking the principal's tone. But they didn't fire me. Yet. Emma hugged her. You're tougher than they are, and that letter Caldwell's got your back. Sarah didn't respond. She didn't know if Ethan's letter would be enough, or if his presence in her life was a blessing or a curse. But as she returned to her classroom, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could weather this storm. The school's outdoor courtyard was alive with laughter, the kind only third graders could produce, wild, unfiltered, and contagious. Sarah stood near a picnic table, overseeing an after-school art club she'd fought to keep funded. The kids were elbow-deep in paint, their smocks splattered with colors that would never wash out. Jamie, her most spirited student, was painting a lopsided rocket ship, his tongue poking out in concentration. Sarah's heart swelled. These moments, messy, chaotic, real, were why she taught. The crunch of gravel caught her attention, and she turned to see Ethan Caldwell approaching, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder. His tie loosened. The sight of him here in her world was jarring. He didn't belong among finger paints and folding tables. Yet he was carrying a stack of pizza boxes and a bag of juice pouches. Though the kids might be hungry, he set the boxes down. His smile was tentative, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You show up with pizza now, he said. The cafeteria food looked questionable, glancing at a tray of soggy nuggets nearby. Figured I'd make myself useful. The kids swarmed the table, their paint-smeared hands grabbing slices as Sarah handed out napkins. Jamie tugged at Ethan's sleeve. You're the money guy, he asked, his eyes wide. Ethan chuckled, crouching to meet Jamie's gaze. Something like that. Are you the rocket ship guy? Jamie grinned, holding up his painting. It's gonna go to Mars. Impressive, Ethan said, studying the canvas with genuine interest. You got a name for it. Star Blaster, Jamie declared, and Ethan nodded solemnly, as if discussing NASA blueprints. Sarah watched, her arms crossed, a mix of amusement and unease swirling in her chest. Ethan was good with the kids, too good. It didn't fit the image of the cold CEO she'd built in her mind. She wanted to dismiss him to keep her walls up, but the way Jamie's face lit up made that harder. "Join us," she said, gesturing to a table covered in art supplies. "Unless you're afraid of getting paint on that suit." Ethan grinned, rolling up his sleeves. "I've survived worse." The afternoon unfolded in a blur of color and chaos. Ethan sat with the kids painting a surprisingly decent city skyline while answering their endless questions. "Do you have a jet?" one girl asked. "Do you live in a castle?" another chimed in. Ethan handled it efficiently, deflecting with stories of coding apps in his garage as a teenager. Sarah listened, her guard softening as he described late nights fueled by instant noodles and ambition. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Jamie told Ethan about his mom's night shifts at the hospital, his voice small but proud. "She's always tired, but she says I will be a scientist." Ethan's expression shifted, a shadow passing over his face. "My mom worked nights too," he said quietly. "Diner waitress. I used to do my homework in the booth while she poured coffee." The kids didn't notice the weight of his words, but Sarah did. She glanced at him, her curiosity piqued. He'd grown up in Detroit, he'd said, scraping by like many of her students. How had he gone from that to this? A billionaire who dropped millions like pocket change. "Miss Miller," Jamie called, holding up a dripping paintbrush. "Look at my stars." Sarah knelt beside him, praising the glittery blobs on his canvas. Ethan watched his paintbrush paused mid-stroke. "You're good with them," he said, his voice low. "They light up around you." She shrugged, wiping paint off her hands. "It's my job. It's more than that," he said, his eyes steady on hers. "You make them feel like they matter." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to brush it off to keep her distance, but his words hit a nerve. She spent every day fighting for these kids, their dreams, their futures. To hear it acknowledged by him of all people felt like a crack in her armor. As the sun dipped below the skyline, the kids packed up, their parents arriving to whisk them away. Sarah and Ethan stayed behind, cleaning brushes in a companionable silence. The courtyard was quiet now, the air cool with the promise of fall. "Thanks for the pizza," Sarah said, stacking paint cans. The kids loved it. Anytime, Ethan said, wiping his hands on a rag. "I meant what I said. You're incredible with them." She glanced at him, searching for the catch. "Why are you here, Ethan?" "Really?" He hesitated, his eyes fixed on the paint-splattered table. "I don't know," he admitted. "I saw you in the rain and something clicked. I wanted to help, but I keep screwing it up." Sarah's heart twisted. She wanted to believe him, but trust was hard-earned in her world. "You're not screwing it up," she said finally. "But you need to understand, this school, these kids are my life. I can't afford to be a headline." He nodded, his expression serious. "I'm working on the press. My team's tracking down the leaks. And I meant what I said in the letter. I'll back you up, Sarah. Whatever it takes." She studied him, the sincerity in his eyes, catching her off guard. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Because you're not like anyone I've ever met. You don't want anything from me. That's rare." Sarah's breath caught. For a moment they stood there, the space between them charged with something unspoken. Then Jamie's voice broke the spell, calling from the gate where his mom waited. Sarah stepped back, her walls snapping back into place. "I've got to go," she said, grabbing her bag. "Thanks for today." Ethan watched her leave, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he was doing, but he felt alive for the first time in years. Sarah Miller was a challenge, a puzzle, a flame. And he wasn't ready to walk away. The diner smelled grease and nostalgia, its checkered floor sticky under Sarah Miller's sneakers as she slid into a booth. The Lower East Side spot was a far cry from the glass towers of Ethan Caldwell's world, its neon sign flickering outside like a heartbeat. Sarah sipped her coffee, the mug chipped but warm in her hands, and stared at the menu without reading it. Her mind was elsewhere on the headlines, the school board, and the man who'd turned her life into a spectacle. Ethan sat across from her, his tailored jacket draped over the booth's edge, looking out of place but oddly at ease. He'd insisted on meeting here away from the cameras and the city's glare after the art club afternoon had left them both unsteady. Sarah had agreed, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way he'd talked to Jamie, or the glimpse of vulnerability he'd shown when he mentioned his mom. Either way, she was here, her guard up, but cracking. "Do you come here often?" Ethan asked, his voice light as he scanned the laminated menu. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as a diner guy." He grinned, leaning back. "I wasn't always a suit. Grew up in places like this, Greasy Spoons in Detroit, where the coffee's bad, but the stories are good." She studied him, searching for the catch. "You're telling me you went from diner booths to penthouses?" "Something like that," he said, his eyes distant. "My mom worked nights, so I'd sit in places like this coding on a second-hand laptop. I built my first app in a booth that was not significantly different from this one." Sarah's fingers tightened around her mug. She hadn't expected that a billionaire with roots like hers, scrappy and hard-won. "What kind of app?" she asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "A budgeting tool," he said, his voice softening. "For people like my mom who were always one paycheck from disaster. It didn't make me rich, but it got me noticed." She nodded, her walls softening despite herself. "That's real. Not what I expected from you." He met her gaze, his eyes steady. "You think I'm all flash, don't you? Private jets and press conferences. Aren't you?" She shot back, though her tone was more playful than sharp. "You dropped $1 million on my school like it was pocket change." He winced just slightly. "Fair. But I meant what I said, Sarah. I want to help, not just the school you." Her heart stuttered, but she pushed it down. "I don't need help," she said, her voice firm. "I need my life back. The headlines, parents, and school board are tearing me apart because of your donation." Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked like the CEO again, calculated, unyielding. "I'm handling the press," he said. "My team's tracking the leaks. And the school board, I'll make sure they back off." Sarah shook her head. "You can't fix everything with money and lawyers, Ethan. This is my world. You don't get it." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Then help me get it. Tell me what it's like teaching kids like Jamie, fighting for every pencil and textbook." She hesitated, her instincts screaming to keep him at arm's length. But his eyes held no trace of the polished billionaire, just a man who wanted to understand. So she talked about the kids who came to school hungry, the parents who worked 3 jobs, the constant budget cuts that left her buying supplies out of her pocket. She told him about Jamie's dreams of being a scientist, about the girl who'd cried when the art program was almost cut. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and she didn't bother hiding it. Ethan listened, his coffee untouched, his attention unwavering. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Not really. I thought the money would fix things." It helped, Sarah admitted. "But it's not just about money. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's hard." He nodded, his expression heavy. "I want to show up, Sarah. For the school. For you." Her breath caught, and she looked away, focusing on the jukebox in the corner. "Don't say things you don't mean," she said. "You're a CEO. Your world's about image, not promises." "That's not fair," he said, his voice sharp, but not angry. "I'm here, aren't I? In a diner with you, no cameras. That's not an image. That's me." Sarah met his gaze, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, to trust the man who'd painted with her kids and carried pizza boxes like it was nothing. But doubt gnawed at her. Was this real, or just another move in his carefully curated life? Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the table. A text flashed across the screen, and Ethan's face tightened as he read it. He swiped it away, But not before Sarah caught a glimpse. "We need to talk about Mom. Call me." "Nate." "Who's Nate?" she asked, her curiosity overriding her caution. Ethan's expression closed off, his CEO mask slipping back into place. "No one," he said too quickly. "Old friend." She didn't buy it, but she let it go. The moment was gone, replaced by a wall she couldn't breach. They finished their coffee in silence, the ease of earlier replaced by something heavier. That night, Ethan lay awake in his penthouse, the city's lights casting shadows across his ceiling. Sarah's words echoed her passion, frustration, and strength in his mind. She was unlike anyone in his world, where every move was a transaction, every smile a strategy. But the text from Nate, his estranged brother, had ripped open a wound he'd buried years ago. He'd left Detroit behind along with the family he couldn't save. Nate had been a kid when Ethan clawed his way to success, leaving his brother to navigate their mother's struggles alone. The guilt was a constant ache, one he drowned in work and ambition. Now, Nate's message threatened to unravel everything. Ethan sat up, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to be the man Sarah saw, a man who showed up, who made a difference. But the weight of his past, his image, his empire pressed down on him. Could he be both the CEO who commanded the world and the man who sat in a diner listening to a teacher's dreams? He grabbed his phone, typing a quick response to Nate. "Not now. Busy." He hit send, then deleted the thread, his chest tight. He'd deal with his brother later. Right now, Sarah was the puzzle he needed to solve. But as he stared out at the city, he wondered if he was the one who needed solving. Sarah's apartment was quiet, and the lilies Ethan had given her were still bright on her kitchen table. She sat on the couch grading papers, but her mind drifted to the diner. Ethan's story about his mom and his quiet intensity as he listened to her felt real. Too real. She'd spent years keeping men at a distance, protecting her heart and career. But Ethan was slipping through her defenses, and she didn't know how to stop it. Emma called, her voice crackling through the phone. "So, how was the dinner date?" "Not a date," Sarah said, rolling her eyes. "Just coffee." "Uh-huh," Emma said, her tone teasing. "Coffee with a billionaire who's got it bad for you." "Spill," Sarah sighed, setting her pen down. "He's complicated. One minute he's this untouchable CEO, the next he's talking about growing up broke like he gets it. But I don't know if it's real or just a good story." Emma was quiet for a moment. "You think he's playing you?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But I can't afford to find out the hard way. The school board's already on my case. If this blows up, I lose everything." "Then keep your eyes open," Emma said. "But don't shut him out just because he's rich. People can surprise you." Sarah hung up, her mind racing. She didn't want to be surprised. She wanted her life back, her kids' classroom and quiet evenings. But Ethan Caldwell was a storm, and she was caught in it whether she liked it or not. The school's hallway was a maze of construction paper and glitter, the walls lined with student artwork that fluttered in the drafty air. Sarah Miller stood outside her classroom, her arms crossed as she listened to the principal's latest warning. The school board was still concerned, the headlines refusing to die down. Ethan Caldwell's donation had kept the school afloat, but also painted a target on Sarah's back. Parents were whispering, some openly questioning whether she'd leveraged her connection to Ethan for the money. The tabloids hadn't helped. Their latest story claimed she was milking the billionaire for all he's worth. Sarah's jaw tightened as she nodded at the principal's words, her mind elsewhere. She'd spent years building her reputation, proving she was more than a teacher. She was a lifeline for kids like Jamie. Now it was unraveling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan's world was swallowing hers whole. Sarah's phone buzzed with a new email as the principal walked away. It was from a reporter requesting a comment on a story about her and Ethan. She deleted it without reading further, her stomach churning. She needed to teach and focus on her kids, but the world outside her classroom wouldn't let her. Across town, Ethan sat in his office, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop to his growing frustration. His tablet was open to a news site where a headline screamed Caldwell's charity, or cover up teachers' ties, raise questions. The vicious article implied Sarah had manipulated him for the donation, painting her as an opportunist. Ethan's fist clenched, crumpling a report on his desk. Clara, his assistant, stood by the door, her tablet glowing with updates. "It's Victor Lang," she said. Her voice clipped. "He's feeding the press. Our team traced the leaks to his PR firm." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Victor Lang, his rival in the tech world, had been gunning for him for years. The man thrived on chaos, using his media connections to undermine competitors. This time, he'd gone too far, dragging Sarah into the crossfire. "Get me everything on Lang," Ethan said, his voice cold. "And set up a meeting with the school board. I'm done letting him play games." Clara nodded, but her expression was skeptical. "You sure you want to escalate? Lang's got dirt on everyone. If you push, he'll dig deeper." "Let him," Ethan said, standing. "He's not touching her." Clara raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. As she left, Ethan's phone buzzed again, another text from Nate. "You can't keep ignoring me. We need to talk." Ethan swiped it away, his chest tight. He couldn't deal with his brother now, not with Sarah's life imploding because of him. He grabbed his coat and headed for the school. He needed to see her to warn her about Lang. But more than that, he needed to know she was okay. Sarah was in the middle of a math lesson when Ethan arrived, his knock soft but urgent. The kids whispered as she stepped into the hall, her expression guarded. "You're making a habit of this," she said, crossing her arms. "What now?" "Victor Lang," Ethan said, his voice low. "He's behind the stories. He's trying to hurt me by going after you." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Your rival. Why am I in the middle of your corporate war?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Frustration etched into his features. "Because I made you a target. The donation, the headlines. It's all ammunition for him." "I'm sorry, Sarah." She shook her head, her voice sharp. "Sorry doesn't fix this. The school board is threatening to suspend me. Parents are pulling their kids from my class. This isn't just about you anymore." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "Let me help. My lawyers can shut Lang down and I'll talk to the board." "No," she cut him off, her eyes blazing. "Every time you help, it gets worse. I told you, Ethan, I handle my own battles." He opened his mouth to argue, but the fire in her eyes stopped him. She was right. His world was bleeding into hers, and he hadn't stopped to consider the cost. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice quieter. "Back off," she said, her tone softening but firm. "Let me deal with the school. You handle your rival. Keep me out of it." He nodded, though every instinct screamed to protect her. "Okay. But if you need me, Sarah." "I know," she said, turning back to her classroom. "Don't make this more complicated than it already is." As she closed the door, Ethan stood in the empty hallway, the weight of her words settling over him. He'd built an empire by controlling every outcome, but Sarah was a variable he couldn't predict. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, the lilies on her table, wilting slightly at the edges. She scrolled through her emails, each a new demand from parents or reporters. The school board had scheduled another meeting, and the principal had hinted at temporary measures to restore calm. Suspension was starting to feel inevitable. Emma dropped by, her arms full of takeout bags. She said, "You look like you need noodles," setting the food on the counter. "What's the latest?" Sarah recounted Ethan's visit, her voice heavy. "He says it's his rival Victor Lang stirring things up." "But I don't know, Emma. What if this happens when you get too close to someone like him?" Emma handed her a container of lo mein. "You think he's using you?" "Not on purpose," Sarah said, poking at her food. "But his world, it's like a hurricane. I'm just trying to keep my head above water." Emma leaned back, her eyes sharp. Maybe, but he's showing up Sarah. Not just with money, pizza, paintbrushes, and that letter to the board. That's not nothing. Sarah didn't answer. She wanted to believe Ethan was different, that the man who'd listened to her in the diner was real. But the headlines, the whispers, the threat to her job were real too. And they were louder. As Emma left, Sarah's phone buzzed with a new email from the school board. Final review, it read, with a date set for next week. Her heart sank. She'd fought for everything in her life, her degree job, her kids' futures. But this fight felt bigger, messier, and Ethan Caldwell was at the center of it. Across the city, Ethan sat in his penthouse. His team's report on Victor Lang spread across his desk. The man was a snake, using his media connections to twist the narrative. Ethan could crush him, leverage his own influence, call in favors. But Sarah's words echoed in his mind. Keep me out of it. He wanted to protect her, to fix this. But she'd made it clear she didn't want his brand of help. His phone lit up again. Nate, relentless. You owe me, Ethan. Please don't make me find you. Ethan stared at the screen, his chest tight. He'd spent years burying his past, but it was catching up. And so was Sarah Miller, a woman who made him question everything he'd built. Ethan Caldwell felt like he was losing control for the first time in years, and he wasn't sure he minded. The ballroom glittered under a canopy of crystal chandeliers, the air thick with the scent of champagne and ambition. Sarah Miller stood at the crowd's edge, her borrowed emerald gown clinging to her frame, its fabric starkly contrasting with her usual classroom sweaters. The dress, a gift from Ethan Caldwell, felt like a costume, its weight reminding her she didn't belong in this world of Manhattan's elite. The charity gala was a sea of tailored suits and sparkling jewelry, where every smile hid a calculation. Sarah's fingers tightened around her clutch eyes, scanning the room for an escape. Ethan had convinced her to attend, his voice earnest over the phone. It's for a good cause, he'd said, education reform. You'd be helping Sarah, not just me. She reluctantly agreed, hoping her presence might sway the school board, who were still circling like sharks after the tabloid frenzy. But now, surrounded by investors and socialites, she felt like a fish out of water. Ethan stood across the room, his tailored tuxedo accentuating his broad shoulders, his presence commanding even in a crowd of power players. He was deep in conversation with a group of men in suits, his gestures sharp and confident. Sarah watched him, torn between admiration and unease. He moved through this world easily, a king in his domain, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was a pawn in his game. Miss Miller. A woman in a sequined gown approached her, smile polite but sharp. You're the teacher, the one from the headlines. Sarah's stomach twisted. That's me, she said, forcing a smile. Just here to support the cause. The woman's eyes gleamed with curiosity. How sweet, and how fortunate to have Ethan Caldwell's attention. He's quite the catch. Sarah's smile tightened. I'm here for the kids, not a headline. Of course, the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. She drifted away, leaving Sarah with a sour taste in her mouth. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She grabbed a glass of water from a passing tray, wishing it were more substantial. Ethan caught her eye from across the room and excused himself, weaving through the crowd to reach her. You okay? He asked, his voice low, his eyes searching hers. Peachy. Sarah said, her tone dry. Your friends are charming. He winced, glancing at the woman who'd just left. Ignore her. She's fishing for gossip. Everyone here is, Sarah said, setting her glass down. I don't belong here, Ethan. This isn't my world. He stepped closer, his voice softening. It doesn't have to be. You're here because you care about the same things I do. Kids' schools making a difference. She wanted to believe him, but the room's opulence mocked her. The dress, the chandeliers, and the casual wealth were all a reminder of the gap between them. "You sure about that?" she asked. "Or am I just part of your image?" His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a man in a pinstripe suit approached, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. He said, "Caldwell, that was a brilliant move with that school donation." His voice loud enough to draw eyes. "Great PR. Keeps the shareholders happy." Ethan's smile was tight professional. "It's about the kids, not the headlines," he said, echoing Sarah's earlier words. The man laughed, glancing at Sarah. "And this must be the teacher. Smart move, tying it to a feel-good story. People eat that up." Sarah's blood ran cold. She looked at Ethan, waiting for him to correct the man and say anything to prove this wasn't a stunt. But Ethan only nodded, his expression neutral. "We're here to support education," he said, his voice smooth. The man wandered off, and Sarah's heart sank. She turned to Ethan, her voice low but sharp. "Is that what this is? A feel-good story for your brand?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Sarah, no. That's not Save It." She cut him off, her voice trembling with anger. "I heard you. I saw you." She turned, pushing through the crowd toward the exit, her gown swishing against her legs. The air felt suffocating, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on her. Ethan followed, catching her arm just outside the ballroom, where the city's lights glittered through a wall of windows. "Sarah, wait," he said, his voice urgent. "That guy's an idiot. I didn't mean—" "You didn't correct him," she said, pulling her arm free. "You let him think I'm some prop in your PR campaign. Do you know what that feels like?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etching his features. "I'm trying to navigate this, Sarah. These people, they expect a specific image. I can't just—" "Then don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't drag me into your world if you're going to play the game. I'm not a story, Ethan. I'm a person." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Ethan stood frozen, the city's glow reflecting in his eyes. He wanted to chase her, to explain, but the truth stopped him. He had played the game, letting the investors' assumptions slide to keep the conversation smooth. It was second nature, a reflex honed by years in boardrooms. But seeing the hurt in Sarah's eyes, he realized the cost. Sarah took a cab back to her Brooklyn apartment, the city blurring past in a haze of lights and rain. She kicked off her heels, the gown pooling on the floor, as she changed into sweats. Her phone buzzed with messages. Emma, the school board, even a reporter, but she ignored them. All she could hear was the investor's voice, the casual dismissal of everything she'd fought for. She sank onto the couch, and the wilted lilies on her table were a reminder of Ethan's apologies. How many times could he say sorry before it stopped meaning anything? She'd let herself believe he was different, that the man who'd painted with her kids was real. But tonight she'd seen the CEO who played angles and managed perceptions. Her phone lit up with a text from Ethan. "I screwed up. Can we talk?" She stared at it, her thumb hovering over the screen. Part of her wanted to reply to give him a chance. But the other part, the part that had fought for every inch of respect in her career, told her to walk away. She turned off her phone and curled under a blanket, the city's hum a distant echo. Ethan stood in his penthouse, the gala's afterglow fading into regret. The view of Manhattan, usually a source of pride, felt hollow tonight. He'd let Sarah down. Its weight was heavier than any boardroom loss. He poured a glass of whiskey, the burn doing little to dull the ache. Clara called, her voice brisk through the speaker. "The school board's meeting is tomorrow. You still want to go?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice firm. "And get me everything on that investor. I want to know who he's talking to." Clara paused. "You're taking this personally, aren't you?" "It's not just business," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "Not anymore." He hung up his eyes, drifting to his phone. Nate's texts were still unanswered. a reminder of the family he'd left behind. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. I'm not a story. I'm a person. He'd spent years building an empire, crafting an image. But for the first time, he wondered if that image was worth the cost. Sarah Miller's classroom was a sanctuary, its walls covered in student drawings and multiplication charts, starkly contrasting the glittering chaos of Ethan's gala. She stood at her desk, grading papers under the flicker of fluorescent lights. But her mind was elsewhere. The memory of the investor's words calling her a feel-good story burned like a fresh wound. She'd walked out on Ethan, her anger carrying her through the city. But now, in the quiet of her classroom, doubt crept in. Had she been too harsh? Was he playing a role, or was there more to him? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Emma, her voice crackling through the speaker. You okay? Heard you left the gala in a blaze of glory. Sarah sighed, stacking papers to distract herself. Not exactly. Just had to get out. It was too much. Spill. Emma said, her tone teasing but warm. What did Caldwell do this time? Sarah recounted the night, the gown, the investor's comment, Ethan's silence. He didn't say anything, Emma. Just let the guy think I was part of his PR stunt. Emma was quiet for a moment. Ouch! But Sarah, you know how those rooms work. He's a shark in a suit. Doesn't mean he doesn't care. Doesn't it? Sarah asked, her voice soft. I can't tell what's real with him. One minute he's painting with my kids, the next he's playing CEO games. Emma's voice softened. You like him, don't you? Sarah froze her pen, hovering over a worksheet. She wanted to deny it, to insist Ethan was just a complication. But the truth was more complicated to ignore. The way he'd listened in the diner, the way he'd made Jamie laugh, it had cracked her defenses. Maybe she admitted. But I can't afford to, Emma, not with my job on the line. Then look at what he does not. What he says, Emma said. Words are cheap, actions aren't. Sarah hung up her eyes, drifting to a stack of new books on her desk. They'd arrived that morning, a donation from an anonymous source. But the note tucked inside had Ethan's handwriting for Jamie and the others. Keep shining. She traced the words, her heart twisting. Was this an action or another gesture to ease his guilt? Across town, Ethan sat in his office, the city's skyline a cold comfort. His desk was littered with reports, but his focus was on a single email from Clara. The school board's pushing for Sarah's suspension. Lang's feeding them dirt. Victor Lang, his rival, was relentless, using Sarah to undermine Ethan's credibility. The tabloids were now hinting at a scandal involving the donation, questioning whether Ethan had ulterior motives. Ethan's fist clenched. He'd underestimated Lang, and Sarah was paying the price. He called Clara, his voice sharp. Please get me a meeting with Lang. Tonight. You sure? Clara asked. He's a snake. He'll twist this. I don't care, Ethan said. He's not touching her. He hung up, his mind racing. Sarah's words at the gala had cut deep. I'm not a story. I'm a person. He'd spent years crafting a persona, managing perceptions, but she'd seen through it. And now he was losing her trust. His phone buzzed with another text from Nate. You can't keep running, Ethan. Mom's gone. I'm all you've got. The words hit like a punch, stirring memories of Detroit late nights in diners. His mother's tired smile, the brother he'd left behind. He swiped the message away, but the guilt lingered. He couldn't fix his past, but he could fight for Sarah. That evening, Ethan met with his advisor, Marcus, a grizzled PR veteran who'd seen him through a dozen crises. They sat in a quiet corner of a midtown bar, the clink of glasses, a backdrop to their conversation. Marcus leaned back, his eyes sharp. You're in deep, kid, he said. This teacher, she's not just a headline. You're falling for her. Ethan didn't deny it. She's different, Marcus. She doesn't care about my money or my name, but I keep screwing it up. Marcus sipped his drink, his expression thoughtful. You want to keep her? Drop the CEO mask. You're playing a role, always have, but she's not buying it. Show her who you are, not what you've built. Ethan nodded, the words sinking in. He'd spent years hiding behind his success, burying the kid from Detroit who'd fought for every scrap. But Sarah saw through that, and it terrified him as much as it thrilled him. The next day, Sarah walked into her classroom to find Jamie beaming, clutching a new science book from the anonymous donation. Miss Miller, look, he said, flipping through pages of planets and stars. It's got everything. Sarah smiled, her heart lifting despite the weight of the past week. It's incredible, Jamie. You're gonna be a scientist yet. As the kids settled into their lessons, Sarah's phone buzzed with an email from the school board. Her suspension was under review and pending a final meeting. Her stomach sank, but Jamie's grin kept her grounded. She couldn't let this break her, not for her kids or herself. That afternoon, Ethan appeared at the school, his suit replaced by jeans and a sweater, his expression earnest. I owe you an apology, he said, standing in the hallway. The gala. I should have shut that guy down. I didn't, and I hurt you. Sarah crossed her arms, her guard up. You did. But it's not just about the gala, Ethan. It's everything, your world, your games. I can't keep up. I'm not asking you to, he said, stepping closer. Please, please let me try, not as a CEO, but as me. She studied him, the sincerity in his eyes chipping away at her resolve. Why should I believe you? She asked, her voice soft but firm. Because I'm here, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. Sarah's heart raced, torn between trust and caution. She didn't know if she could believe him, but the books on her desk, the paint on his hands from the art club, and how he looked at her now were actions, not words. And maybe that was enough to start. The city hummed with its usual chaos, but Sarah Miller's classroom felt like a fortress against the storm outside. The walls, plastered with student drawings and multiplication tables, were a shield from the tabloids and whispers that had plagued her for weeks. She stood at her desk, sorting through a stack of essays, her focus fraying as her phone buzzed with yet another email from the school board. Their final review loomed, and the threat of suspension hung heavy. Sarah's fingers tightened around a pen, her heart pounding with defiance and dread. The latest blow had come that morning, courtesy of Victor Lang, Ethan Caldwell's rival. A new headline screamed across newsstands and social media. Caldwell's dark past. Did billionaires' mistake ruin lives? The article detailed a long-buried incident, a coding error, in one of Ethan's early apps that had crashed a small company's servers, costing jobs and sparking lawsuits. The press painted Ethan as reckless, a tech prodigy who'd climbed to success over others' ruins. Worse, they dragged Sarah into it, suggesting she was complicit in his redemption campaign through the school donation. Sarah tossed her phone onto the desk, the screen still glowing with the article. She didn't know what to believe. Ethan had shown her glimpses of a man who cared, painting with her kids, listening in the diner. But this, a mistake that had hurt people. It cast a shadow over everything. The classroom door creaked open, and Jamie burst in, his backpack bouncing. Miss Miller, he said, holding up a crumpled flyer. The science fair's next week. Can I do my project on Mars? Sarah forced a smile, shoving her worries aside. Mars, huh? Big dreams, Jamie. Let's make it happen. As Jamie chattered about rovers and red dust, he paused, his eyes narrowing. You okay, Miss Miller? You look sad. She ruffled his hair, her throat tight. Just a long day, kiddo. Tell me more about Mars. But Jamie wasn't done. You know that money guy, Mr. Caldwell? He paid for my science camp last summer. Didn't tell anyone. I heard Mom talking about it. Sarah froze, her hand still on his head. What? Jamie nodded, oblivious to the weight of his words. Yeah. Mom said he didn't want it in the papers. Just sent the money. Sarah's mind raced. Ethan, the man she'd accused of playing games, had quietly funded Jamie's camp. No headlines, no fanfare, just a check to help a kid. It didn't fit the image of the reckless CEO in the article, or the polished billionaire who'd let an investor's comment slide at the gala. Who was Ethan Caldwell really? Across town, Ethan sat in his glass-walled office, the city's skyline a blur through his haze of anger. The article about his past was everywhere, shared and dissected on every platform. His phone buzzed with messages from investors, their tone sharp with concern. Stocks were dipping, and the board was demanding a response. Victor Lang had struck deep, unearthing a mistake Ethan had buried years ago, a naive error from his early days, when ambition outpaced caution. Clara, his assistant, stood by his desk, her tablet glowing with updates. "Lang's playing dirty," she said. "He's got contacts at every major outlet. This isn't just about you, it's about her too." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Sarah, is she okay?" Clara hesitated. "The school board's meeting is tomorrow. They're using this to push for her suspension. Lang's feeding them the narrative that she's tied to your scandal." Ethan stood pacing to the window. "This ends now. Get me on the next news cycle. I'm addressing this publicly." Clara's eyes widened. "You sure going public could make it worse? Lang's waiting for you to slip." "I don't care," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "He's not dragging her down with me." As Clara left to arrange the interview, Ethan's phone buzzed with another text from Nate, his estranged brother. "Saw the news. You can't outrun this. Call me." Ethan's chest tightened. Nate had been there during those early days, watching Ethan code through the night, believing in his dreams. When the app crashed, Nate had been the one to say it wasn't his fault. But Ethan had walked away chasing success and leaving his family behind. The past was catching up, and Sarah was caught in the crossfire. Sarah spent her lunch break in the staff room, avoiding the curious glances of her colleagues. Emma slid into the chair beside her, a sandwich in hand. "Did you see the news?" she asked, her voice low. Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on her coffee. "Hard to miss. They're saying Ethan's some villain, and I'm his accomplice." Emma snorted. "Please. Lang's a vulture. He's just jealous. Caldwell's got the spotlight." "Maybe," Sarah said, stirring her coffee. "But what if it's true? What if Ethan's not who he seems?" Emma leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You're forgetting what Jamie said. The guy paid for a kid's camp, but no strings were attached. That's not a villain. That's someone trying to do right." Sarah didn't answer. She wanted to trust Emma and Ethan, who'd shown up with pizza and paintbrushes. But the headlines, the school board, and the investors' words at the gala all painted a different picture, and yet Jamie's words lingered a crack in her doubt. That afternoon, as Sarah guided her class through a reading exercise, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. She stepped into the hall, her arms crossed. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low. "The board's already on my case." "I know," he said, his eyes searching hers. "I saw the article. I'm going on TV tonight to set it straight." Sarah's heart skipped. "You're what I'm telling the truth," he said, "about the mistake, the company. Everything. I won't let Lang use you to get to me." She studied him, torn between gratitude and suspicion. "Why now? Why not just let it blow over?" "Because it's hurting you," he said, his voice raw. "And I can't live with that." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to push him away to protect herself from his world, but his eyes held a sincerity that made her pause. "Just be careful," she said finally. "This isn't just about you anymore." He nodded, a flicker of relief in his expression. "I will. And Sarah, I'm sorry for all of it. As he left, Sarah leaned against the wall, her heart racing. Ethan was about to bear his mistakes for the world for her. It was a risk, a leap, and she didn't know if it would save her or sink them both. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, the TV tuned to a live news broadcast. Ethan stood in a studio, his suit crisp, but his expression unguarded. The anchor leaned forward, her questions sharp. Mr. Caldwell, the article claims your error destroyed a company. What do you say to that? Ethan's voice was steady, but his eyes held a weight Sarah recognized from the diner. It's true, he said. Years ago, I made a mistake. I was young, pushing too fast, and my code failed a small company. People lost jobs. I've carried that guilt every day since. The anchor pressed, but Ethan didn't flinch. I've spent years making amends, he continued, funding startups, creating jobs, and supporting schools like the Lower East Side. Not for headlines, for the people I let down. Sarah's breath caught. He wasn't spinning a story. He was owning it. When the anchor asked about her, Ethan's voice softened. Sarah Miller is the best teacher I've ever met. She had nothing to do with my past. She's fighting for her kids, and I won't let anyone tear her down. The broadcast ended, and Sarah sat silently, the remote heavy in her hand. Ethan had laid himself bare, risking his empire to protect her. But doubt lingered. Could she trust him? Or was this just another move in his game? The morning after Ethan's broadcast, the school buzzed with a new energy. Parents whispered in the hallways, their eyes less hostile than before. The tabloids had shifted, some praising Ethan's honesty, others still digging for dirt. Sarah Miller walked into her classroom, her shoulders squared but her heart heavy. The school board's final meeting was hours away, and Ethan's public confession had changed the game. But whether for better or worse, she wasn't sure. She stood at her whiteboard, guiding her students through a spelling quiz, when Jamie raised his hand. Miss Miller, did you see Mr. Caldwell on TV? He said, "You're the best teacher." The class erupted in giggles, and Sarah's cheeks warmed. "Focus, Jamie," she said, but her smile was genuine. Ethan's words had reached her kids, her sanctuary. That meant something even if she didn't know what to do with it. Emma caught her during lunch, her eyes bright. "You watched the broadcast, right? Guy put his whole career on the line for you." Sarah stirred her coffee, her mind racing. "I know, but it doesn't fix everything. The board's still meeting, and Lang's not done." Emma leaned forward. "Maybe not. But Caldwell showed up. That's more than most would do." Sarah didn't answer. She'd spent the night replaying Ethan's words and his voice's raw honesty. He'd admitted his mistake, taken the hit, and named her the reason. It was a gesture she couldn't ignore, but trust was still a leap she wasn't ready for. Ethan sat in his office, the city's skyline a silent witness to his sleepless night. The broadcast had steadied his company's stock, but the board was still rattled, and Victor Lang was circling, waiting for another opening. Ethan didn't care about Lang, not today. He focused on Sarah, the school board meeting that could cost her everything. Clara knocked her tablet, glowing with updates. "The board's meeting is at 2. You're not invited, but I can get you in. Do it," Ethan said, his voice firm. "And keep digging on Lang. He's not getting away with this." Clara nodded, but her expression was cautious. "You're risking a lot for her, Ethan. You sure she's worth it?" He met her gaze, his answer steady. "She is." As Clara left, Ethan's phone buzzed with another text from Nate. "Saw you on TV. You finally grew a spine. Call me." Ethan's chest tightened. Nate's words were a jab, but they also carried a grudging respect. He typed a quick reply, "Soon," and set the phone down. He couldn't face his brother until he fixed this for Sarah. The school board meeting was sterile, held in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy. Sarah sat across from the panel, her hands folded, her voice steady as she defended herself. "I've done nothing but serve this school," she said. "The donation was Mr. Caldwell's decision, not mine. My focus is on my students." The board chair, a stern woman with a clipboard, frowned. "We understand, Miss Miller, but the publicity has disrupted our community. We're considering a temporary suspension to restore calm." Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her chin up. "My kids need me. You've seen my record. I'm not the problem here." The door opened before the chair could respond, and Ethan walked in, commanding the room. The board members exchanged glances, their unease palpable. "Mr. Caldwell," the chair said, her tone clipped, "this is a closed meeting." "I know," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm, "but I'm here to set the record straight. Sarah had no role in my donation or my past. If you punish her, you're punishing the kids who need her most." The room fell silent. Sarah's eyes met his, a storm of emotions swirling inside her. He was risking his reputation, his leverage for her. Again. The chair cleared her throat. "We'll take your statement into account. Miss Miller, you'll have our decision by tomorrow." Sarah left the meeting, her legs shaky, but her resolve intact. Ethan followed, catching her in the hallway. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice low. "I did," he said, his eyes steady. "But it's not enough. I need to prove it, Sarah. Not with words, with actions." She studied him, her heart torn. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done hiding," he said. "From you, from my past, everything. Let me show you." Sarah hesitated, her instincts warring. She'd spent years protecting herself, her career, her kids. But Ethan's eyes held a promise she couldn't ignore. "One chance," she said finally. "Prove it." He nodded, a flicker of hope in his expression. "I will." That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, the TV replaying Ethan's broadcast in the background. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Meet me tomorrow. I want you to see something." She stared at the message, her heart racing. She didn't know what he had planned, but for the first time, she wanted to find out. Across the city, Ethan sat in his penthouse, a plan forming. He'd spent years running from his past, building walls to protect his empire. But Sarah had cracked those walls, and he wasn't going back. Tomorrow he'd show her who he was, not the CEO, not the headline, but the man falling for her, one action at a time. The hum of the city faded as Sarah Miller stepped off the train in Detroit, her sneakers crunching on the cracked pavement of a station that had seen better days. The air was sharp with the scent of rust and diesel, a far cry from Manhattan's polished chaos. She adjusted her scarf, her breath visible in the late autumn chill, and glanced at Ethan Caldwell beside her. He was dressed down jeans, a wool coat, no trace of the CEO who commanded boardrooms. His expression was tight, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if bracing for impact. Sarah still wasn't sure why she'd agreed to this trip. Ethan's text had been vague, but urgent the night before. "Come with me to Detroit. I need to show you something." After his public confession on TV, his defense at the school board meeting, she'd felt a shift, a crack in her defenses wide enough to let him in. But this, a last-minute flight to his hometown, without explanation beyond a quiet plea. It was a leap, and Sarah wasn't used to leaping. "Why are we here?" she asked, her voice cutting through the station's din as they walked toward a waiting car. Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "My brother," he said finally. "Nate. I need to see him, and I want you to know who I am, really." Sarah's heart stuttered. The texts she'd glimpsed on his phone, the ones he'd dismissed, came rushing back. Nate, the brother he'd barely mentioned, the shadow in his polished life. "Okay," she said, her tone cautious, but soft. "But why me?" He stopped, turning to face her. His eyes held a rawness she hadn't seen before, unguarded and heavy. "Because you see me," he said. "Not the headlines, not the money. You. And I need you to see this part too." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to push back to keep her walls up, but his honesty disarmed her. She nodded, climbing into the car beside him. "Let's go." The drive through Detroit was a study in contrasts. Crumbling factories beside new coffee shops. Graffiti-covered walls next to community gardens. Ethan stared out the window, his silence heavy. Sarah watched him piecing together the man who'd grown up here and coded his way out of diners and into penthouses. She'd seen glimpses of that man who'd painted with her kids and owned his mistakes on national TV. But this trip felt different, like peeling back a layer he'd kept hidden. They pulled up to a modest brick house, its porch sagging, but the lawn neatly trimmed. Ethan hesitated at the door, his hand hovering over the bell. "I haven't been here in years," he said, his voice low. "Not since I left for college." Sarah touched his arm, a small gesture that surprised them both. "You're here now," she said. "That's what matters." He nodded, ringing the bell. The door swung open, revealing a man who could only be Nate. Same sharp jaw, same piercing eyes, but with a weariness Ethan's polish lacked. Nate's expression hardened as he saw his brother. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice gruff. He glanced at Sarah, his gaze softening slightly. "You must be the teacher." "Sarah," she said, offering a hand. Nate shook it, his grip firm but not unkind. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The house smelled of coffee and old wood, its walls lined with photos of a younger Ethan and Nate, a tired-looking woman smiling between them. Sarah's heart ached. Ethan's mother gone now, but alive in these frames. The three sat in the living room, the tension thick. Nate leaned back, arms crossed. "Saw you on TV," he said to Ethan. "Big man owning your mistakes. You think that fixes everything?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm not here to fix the past, Nate. I'm here to start." Sarah stayed quiet, her eyes flicking between them. Ethan's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, fingers twisting in his lap. "I left you," he said, his voice raw. "Mom was struggling, and I ran off to chase my dreams. If I made it, I could save you both. But I was too late for her." Nate's eyes glistened, but his voice was stern. "You sent money checks in the mail like that made up for you being gone. I was a kid, Ethan. I needed my brother." Sarah's chest tightened. She saw Ethan's guilt and the weight of years he couldn't undo. She wanted to reach for him, but this wasn't her moment. It was theirs. "I know," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I screwed up, Nate. I thought success would fix everything, but it didn't. I'm here now. I want to make it right." Nate stood, pacing to the window. "Mom used to say you'd come back," he said. "Even when she was sick, she believed in you. I stopped believing a long time ago." Ethan rose, stepping toward his brother. "Then let me earn it back. Not with money, with time." Nate turned, his eyes searching Ethan's face. The room was silent momentarily, the weight of their shared past hanging heavy. Then Nate nodded, a small, grudging gesture. "Okay," he said, "but don't think one visit fixes it." "It's a start," Ethan said, his voice thick. He glanced at Sarah, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. She smiled, her heart swelling. This was the man she'd glimpsed in the diner, the one who'd painted with her kids, not the CEO, but the brother, the son, the man learning to mend what he'd broken. They spent the day with Nate, and the conversation was slow but honest. Over coffee, he told Sarah about their childhood nights in diners, Ethan coding, while their mom worked double shifts. Sarah shared stories of her classroom, her kids, and the dreams she fought for. Nate listened, his guardedness easing as the hours passed. By evening, The brothers were laughing, tentative but real, over a photo of them, as kids covered in mud from a backyard adventure. Sarah watched, her heart full. Ethan wasn't perfect, but he was trying, not for headlines, but for family. For her. On the flight back to New York, Ethan turned to her, his voice low. "Thank you," he said, "for being there, for seeing me." Sarah met his gaze, her walls crumbling. "You're not what I thought," she said. "But you've got much to prove, Ethan, not just to Nate, but to me." He nodded, his hand brushing hers. "I will." As the plane descended into the city, Sarah felt a shift. Ethan wasn't just a billionaire or a headline. He was a man, flawed and fighting, and she was starting to believe he might be worth the risk. Central Park glowed under the soft light of a late autumn evening, its trees ablaze with crimson and gold. Sarah Miller walked along a winding path, her scarf tucked tight against the chill, her breath mingling with the crisp air. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell carried a thermos of hot cider, his coat unbuttoned despite the cold. The city's hum was distant here, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the occasional laughter of joggers. Sarah felt lighter than she had in weeks, the weight of the tabloids and the school board finally easing. The school board had called that morning, their tone clipped but final. No suspension. Ethan's public confession letter and appearance at their meeting had tipped the scales. Parents were still skeptical, but the headlines had shifted, painting Sarah as a dedicated teacher caught in a billionaire storm. She'd kept her job, her kids, her sanctuary. And yet, as she walked beside Ethan, she knew this moment was about more than her career. They'd spent the weeks since Detroit building something fragile but real. Ethan had shown up not with grand gestures, but with quiet actions. He'd helped fund Jamie. They'd spent the weeks since Detroit building something fragile but real. Ethan had shown up not with grand gestures, but with quiet actions. He'd helped fund Jamie's science fair project, sent books to the school library, and started visiting Nate regularly, rebuilding their bond one call at a time. Sarah had watched her guard lowering with each step he took. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was enough to make her believe. They stopped at a bench overlooking the lake, the water reflecting the city's lights like scattered stars. Ethan set the thermos down, his hands fidgeting in a way Sarah had come to recognize as nerves. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "about us, about what comes next." Sarah's heart skipped, but she kept her tone light. "Big plans, Caldwell." He smiled, a rare, unguarded grin. "Maybe. But first, I need to tell you something." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught, her eyes widening as he opened it to reveal a simple silver ring. No diamonds, just a delicate band etched with a subtle wave pattern. "It's not what you think," he said quickly, reading her expression. "Not yet, anyway. It's a promise to keep showing up and proving I'm more than the headlines. For you, for your kids, for us." Sarah's throat tightened, her eyes locked on the ring. It wasn't flashy or the thing a billionaire would buy to impress. Like him at that moment, it was real, no suit, no cameras, just Ethan. She said, "You don't have to do this," her voice soft. "I already see you." "I know," he said, taking her hand. "But I want to. I've spent years building walls, Sarah. You're the first person who made me want to tear them down." She let him slip the ring onto her finger, its weight light, but grounding. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling with a smile. "But you're on probation, Caldwell. One wrong move and I'm keeping the ring and ditching you." He laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "Fair deal." They sat on the bench sipping cider, and the city's pulse was a quiet backdrop. Ethan's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as they watched the lake ripple. Sarah leaned against him, her heart full. She'd fought for her kid's job and place in the world, Now she was fighting for something new, something with him. The next morning, Sarah walked into her classroom to find a package on her desk, a stack of science kits for her students, each labeled with a note from Ethan's company. There is no press release or fanfare, just tools to help her kids dream bigger. She smiled, tucking the note into her pocket, the ring glinting on her finger. Emma caught her in the staff room, her eyes zeroing in on the ring. "Well, damn," she said, grinning. "Caldwell's stepping up." Sarah laughed, her cheeks warm. "He's trying. We'll see if he keeps it up." "He will." Emma said, her tone certain. "Guys got it bad for you. And those kids." Sarah didn't argue. She'd spent too long guarding her heart. Now she was ready to let someone in just a little. Across town, Ethan stood in his office, a new project proposal spread across his desk. It was a nationwide education initiative inspired by Sarah's classroom, a network of grants and resources for underserved schools, starting with hers. He'd kept it quiet, wanting her input before it went public. This wasn't about headlines. It was about her and the kids she fought for daily. His phone buzzed with a text from Nate. "Proud of you, big shot. Keep showing up." Ethan smiled, typing a quick reply. "Always." He'd lost years with his brother, but he was making them back one visit at a time. As he signed the proposal, his thoughts drifted to Sarah, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her students and challenged him from the moment they met. He'd built an empire, but she was creating something better: hope, trust, a future. And he wanted to be part of it. That evening, Sarah and Ethan met at a community center on the Lower East Side, where the school's science fair was in full swing. Jamie stood proudly by his Mars project, a model rover made of cardboard and LEDs, its lights blinking, as he explained it to a crowd of parents. Sarah beamed, her hand brushing Ethan's as they watched. "You did this," she said, her voice soft. "Not just the money, the belief in him." Ethan shook his head. "You did. I just helped." She smiled, leaning into him. "We're a team then." He nodded, his heart whole, a team. As the fair wound down, they stepped outside, the city's lights stretching. Sarah looked at the ring on her finger, then at Ethan, his eyes warm in the glow of a street lamp. "This is just the start," she said. "For us. For them." He pulled her close, his voice a whisper for all of us. They walked into the night, hand in hand, the city theirs, not as a billionaire and a teacher, but as two people building something real and lasting for themselves and the kids who needed them most.